Well, we almost have, I think, enough people. So thank you for making the time to attend the Earth Observation Australia Whole of Community meeting. Stuart Finn from the University of Queensland. I'm chairing Earth Observation Australia at the moment. Just in terms of some logistics for today, if you can keep your microphone on mute, that would be really helpful. If you do want to make a point during the presentation, there are two ways of doing it. One, you can put up your hand, or two, you can actually write some comments into the chat window as well. If you've got any technical challenges as well on your end, please also put it into the chat window. There will be specific times in the meeting where we're after feedback and discussion, so we'll let you know that. I would ask today for all of, or for the majority of the meeting, that we save any questions to set question periods, because we do have a number of items to actually get through, which is extremely good for a change, and lots of positive news to start going as well. So I'd just like to thank all the people who've prepared presentations today, and also to Joe Edkins in the office with me for helping to put things together. And so just so everyone knows, we are recording the audio and the video for the meeting as well at the moment. Okay. All right, so just to get going, hopefully everybody can see the screen. If you can't see the screen, just let me know, either on the whole group chat or otherwise. Okay, so the agenda for today, just a quick welcome and an update of where we're going, particularly in relation to the recently announced space agency. Then getting on to the two main items for today, implementing the community plan. So we'll hear from the steering committee and the working groups in terms of what they're actually doing to implement those 5 priorities. Then we have a number of reports from different areas in terms of Earth observation at a state and national level, and international engagement. And as well, for the trial, for the first time, we're starting to bring in new private industry companies and potential partners to talk about what they're doing, so the community as a whole knows about it today. So fortunately we've got Anastasia Volkova from Fluorosat. FierySat weren't able to make the presentation deadline, so they'll be the next one as well. So that the bulk of today will be items 2 and 3, and then we'll finish off and move on as well. Okay, so just a reminder in terms of where we're going with directions for Earth Observation Australia. We are driven by that 10-year community plan that you can see on the right there. And we're aiming for that vision in the second dot point, that we've got Earth observation being very widely used. The plan's providing us with a way of working across government, industry, research and other components of the community that helps us grow our Earth observation capability. So this is about collaboration, and you'll hear how that's happening soon, and we'll work with this plethora of activities. One of the key points of Earth Observation Australia is we want to make sure that each of those circles in that Venn diagram that you can see on the right there is able to achieve their maximum capacity, so that we have government at national, state and local levels being able to use Earth observation for their roles, that we've got industry, able to use data that's on a continually supplied basis, and essentially build and supply markets to use Earth observation data. And we've got research sitting in between to help us deal with the new data sets that are coming in, the new processing capabilities, so that both government and industry can continue to build their capacity. This is a rapidly changing space, as we all know at the moment, and we'll hear more about that today. Okay, so just moving into actually implementing the plan at the moment. The steering committee at present, just to clarify its role for everyone on the call, the steering committee actually looks at how all the working group activities sit together and deliver the main priorities for the plan. They also deal with sourcing funding for what we're doing and communicating and to a certain extent lobbying what we do as well. So there'll be some reports on that in a minute. The working groups for the community plan, there's 5 of them. They're split based on the 5 priorities. So the first one is connection and coordination. Glenn Campbell's the lead. He's not able to present today, but Michael Hewson will do that. The second one is international relations, and that's Chris Rudiger, who's doing that with some assistance from Commonwealth agencies. The third one on infrastructure and people is Arco Lucia. Arco's not available to present today, but I believe Tim Malthus will say a few words on that. The fourth one is access to Earth observation data and services from Edward King. I'm not sure who's presenting that today. And the last one is on industry engagement, which is Sylvia Michael. So just quickly, where are we in terms of our activities in 2018? I think one of the key points there is, we're at 420 members. We've got all our agencies involved. The value of what we're doing, we need to revise that number there to make it a bit more accurate. We're now actively addressing the 5 priorities of the plan and linking that in with a lot of national activities as well. And we'll come back to talking about national research infrastructure, operational infrastructure later, and also a little bit about the Space Agency. They're the 5 priorities again. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but just a reminder that those are the things we're focused on doing. They're the things that will help us engage effectively with the Space Agency in the direction it's going. It'll help us engage with other key activities like Digital Earth Australia, and then other potential activities like proposed CRCs and Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence activities in these areas as well. So we're organised and can interact in that space. So just looking briefly at the steering committee, the 2 priority activities that are ongoing, aside from the first one, is delivering the plan. At our last meeting, we just started working group meetings. As you'll see in a minute, they've progressed in terms of building implementation plans. And I'll leave it to them to talk about that in a minute. The third item is seeking resources to support what we're actually doing in Earth Observation Australia. So to help pay for activities like this one, secretariat support and coordination meetings. That will be the number 1 focus of the steering committee over the next 2 to 3 months as well. So hopefully we'll report back on that later on. I did want to show that slide just to reiterate the point that the continuation of what we do in Earth Observation Australia so far has relied on a very large amount of volunteer work that's come out of people across the country. And I'd just like to acknowledge that Geoscience Australia supported a considerable part of this as well. But we need to move to a significantly higher level of work and engagement. There are a number of definite sources that we have for money. We've got a growth plan in terms of staff to acquire in the first year, second year and beyond, and we need at least 2 to 3 years funding and a plan for sustainability to do that. So I do want to plant this in everyone's head now that a focus on obtaining money from a range of sources is a key concern of this group. If we don't have it, it's not going to continue. Okay. All right. Just moving on to working groups at the moment, and we'll hear from each of them in a minute. The focus of the working groups at the moment is highlighted in orange there at the moment. Each of the priorities that they're dealing with had a set of actions and possible projects that were identified in our 10-year planning process document. The working groups have been looking at those sets of material and coming up with implementation strategies. And they're all at various stages of doing that. So you'll hear a little bit about it today. So what I might do now is just throw over to, in this case, the people who are going to talk on behalf of each of the working groups to give a very short update. So Michael Houston from Central Queensland Uni, you're up first.
Thanks, Stuart. And can you hear me there?
Yes, I can hear you quite clearly. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you. I guess like most groups, we've got two priorities from the plan. The first one is the formation of a national Earth observation coordination mechanism. And the second one is about the development of a new national suite of forums for Earth observation. So thinking about the first one, which is the coordination mechanism or the communication mechanism for the National Earth Observation effort. We've spent some time to clarify the roles of Earth Observation Australia, so we're clear in our mind what mechanisms are to be designed or thought about. And we've come up with some concepts and some diagrams and an idea of what the intent of the communication and coordination should be. So that means we now need to move on to the actual designing of that. I mean, some of that, of course, is taking place. We're in one, clearly. But we, just to codify and clarify that, we need to work through some of that. And then as a result, if some of those things, for instance, one of those things is a revamp of the web presence that we have for Earth Observation Australia, that's going to take some resources and some time and some planning to implement that. So they're the sort of things we now need to sort of come to grips with in a more sort of less planning stage now that we've got some of those concepts in mind. For the second one, and I know Stuart in particular has been pretty busy in setting up some discussions with the National Conference. There's an idea it might occur in September 2019. And of course, now we need to be thinking about things like, well, can we get some seed funding for it? There is some discussion that's in the wiki about how it might be conducted and what some of the outcomes might be from this sort of gathering. And then, once that's underway, perhaps with a steering committee and other sorts of things, determine what other sorts of forums might be useful. Look, I think that's probably a soldier's five, Stuart.
Okay, thanks, Michael. So just a note to everyone who's presenting, if you let me know, excuse me, to advance slides, I'll try and make sure I remember to do that. A quick follow-up on Michael's point, that conference, we do have significant interest from the Brisbane Convention and Entertainment Centre to host that. And they are in the process of running a scoping study at the moment to look at the market viability for doing that every 2 years. The reality of it is it would not start until September 2020, being the first time. And that, one of the key things we need to make sure it sits, in a complementary space to conferences like Locate. But more on that later. So thanks very much, Michael. Okay, the next one's Chris Rudiger from Monash. So, Chris, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Thanks.
All right, so our group is really looking into reaching beyond our borders. We've had email discussions and a bit of a meeting between Spinek, Michael, and myself. We're getting support from CSIRO and Geoscience Australia through Alex Help and John Ross. So in this, how to say that? So in the first instance, it's we've identified that we don't, beyond the CICSI reports, we don't have any good source for cost-benefit analysis that has been done for the Australian sector, which is one of the key points for when we look into our second point, where we say develop a robust process to assess options and cost benefits to meet the Australian EO data needs. So we have to get an understanding where the needs are, and also to get support, we need to have an understanding where the costs and the benefits are at the end. So we need to come up with some sort of review system to quantify some of those points. Another thing that we've identified is that at the moment it's a bit of a splinter system how we are reaching out to other space agencies or agencies overseas in any case. So what we need is to collate information about existing capabilities, but also existing contexts that are already operational, because what we are thinking is that it's better to bundle all those activities together. I mean, the space agency is one aspect of those. However, now for the space agency to go blindly out and then coming back saying, well, DEA or GA or those units are doing it already, would be a bit of a strategically unsatisfactory progress, let's put it that way. Then another aspect is that we need to reach out to our government, and that's also through the cost-benefit analysis, to secure more calibration and validation capabilities. In Australia, we're already doing a lot, but a lot of those projects are ad hoc. We need to get government buy-in on a long term, because otherwise partners like NASA, ESA, or those big entities, that they're looking long term rather than next 3 years financial cycle. And last point that we discussed in the group was also to start reaching out to similar agencies as the Australian ones, such as the Dutch or the Czech, which have gone through that process, to see how they've proceeded and what structure they've put into place, what was successful and what didn't work. I mean, it's always good to learn from those. And also they're starting to build those links as well to those agencies, not only to the big players. We've got some links there already.
Excellent. All right. Thanks very much, Chris. Those last 2 points are quite critical. And when we mention the space agency later on, I'll come back to that. I guess I just ask all the speakers today just to make sure you try and keep the time, because we've got a lot to get through. Okay, on to working group 3, Arco Lucia and Tim Malthus. Tim, were you able to give us an update on this?
Yes, Stuart. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Good, great. Okay, thanks, folks. Just some notes. We don't have any presentation notes for this, but just a brief update on this activity, which Arco and I have been coordinating. As the presentation says, it's really around making sure that we actually have the pathways in place to train people with the required STEM skills, as well as a background in Earth observation to keep people coming into this particular sector and to develop novel applications, etc. The other thing that goes with that is then making sure that we have an assured sort of affordable high-speed communication network with long-term security on that and a decent enough spectrum to allow data transmission across the country. So largely the approach so far has been taken by Arco and I is really around brainstorming what might fit into these particular categories, but the actions we've identified so far, particularly around education and training, have been to actually undertake an inventory of remote sensing courses and professional courses undertaken at universities and outside, to institute a series of webinars instituted through Earth Observation Australia, so on this very platform, webinars that actually where we get people outlining their research or outlining a particular application, how they've undertaken something, and to allow upskilling across the community that way. And the other the two other vehicles have been really about the opportunity for developing hybrid master's courses. And what we mean by hybrid is that they're not housed in a particular university, but actually might be taught by a number of universities, so the students actually transfer themselves from centre to centre. There's a very good model that works in Europe along this model. And within that master's program, actually ensuring that students undertake placements. So these might be placements within industry, placements within the government sector, or even a placement within a university research group. The other aspect is really around the opportunities for targeted micro degrees, so short, sharp courses. On the infrastructure front, our first task is really to undertake a survey of the infrastructure that currently exists, plus essentially to gather information about the bottlenecks of that infrastructure that people face. So that will be an online survey plus one-on-one interviews with experts. We then, from that, essentially want to develop a plan towards the idea of a central information hub, so that people have access to data and data cubes, as well as other archives. And it's really to explore what the NCI infrastructure can do for people, whether or not that is the ideal platform for moving forward. And it's really then to explore funding opportunities, and those funding opportunities might be direct from government, or they might be from perhaps ARC funded opportunities. I think, Stuart, my time is probably up. I'll leave it at that. There's a couple of other categories, but I think I'll leave it at that.
It's fine. I think I've looked through what Arco and Tim have done, and it is quite comprehensive. So I think one of the things we're going to need to do is look at how we communicate some of these things back to the group, and you're seeing the benefit of having multiple people engaged in these in terms of what we're actually uncovering. I think Phil Delaney raised a point in that discussion. I think people can see my chat window there as well, that, that some, I guess the ASERA group, which is one of the, I think, spatial coordination groups, has looked at spatial courses across Australia. So Phil, are you actually able to send us the links to that so we can look at it, please?
Unfortunately, I don't have the links, but Stefan Winter will. He owns that sheet.
Right. Can you give us a contact address? Because I don't know who that is. So.
Yeah, sure. No worries.
If I could say one more thing, Stuart, if there's anybody interested, particularly from the government or industry sector, interested in assisting us in putting this this documentation or this plan together, it would be really great to hear from them.
Mm. Thanks, Tim. I think that's a common outreach point from each of the working groups here. They've got a very large task, and each of them is coming up with an implementation plan to run over the next 2 to 3 years, where we're going to look at resourcing for it as well. Okay, so right, I note Laurie's point about what may or may not be in that review. So I think we don't know what's in it till we look at it, but that's a good point. Thanks, Laurie. Right, on to the next group. So this will be Debbie Chamberlain presenting on behalf of Edward King.
Oh, good. Yes, thanks, Stuart. Thanks for my slide.
Yep.
Now we've got our working group is working group 4, and we have 6 priority tasks that we are discussing.
Sorry, Debbie, can I just interrupt? Can you change those from being called priorities to tasks? Because the plan has 5 priorities. So it's just a bit confusing.
Yep, that's okay.
Thanks.
All right. Now, first one, we've been looking at compiling a list of resources or a literature review of surveys that have been undertaken, for example, from the EOA website. We've been talking to prime responders, or we plan to talk to prime responders from EOA surveys, and also the expert review group report that led to the Space Agency. We believe this is important, not just as future respondents, but also as people who responded for a reason. So we should ask them what their reason was. That is, they need to have more influence, or there's a frustration aspect, or they're hoping for something to happen in the future. since that gives us an idea of how to pitch future requests and what questions to formulate for targeted responses. We also want to define the mechanisms for reviewing the relative success of the survey that we're going to put together and how it might evolve next time. All right, the next one is scoping if there is an opportunity to work with the new Australian Space Agency to do some of the aggregation. And a recurrent implicit theme was the idea of giving back to providers. How do we do that and how do we maximise the impact of doing that? Okay, the next one is on the ground. It means support for open data principles and supporting standards around things like metadata, formats, APIs, to develop metrics to recognise the value that agencies provide. So there's a recognition of good practices, exemplars within the EOA community, and determining what these practices are of value. This one is a meta catalogue that we should develop attached to the EOA website that points to existing other sources of information. We thought that was probably the most sustainable way to go and would still need active curation, but mostly it would be a collection of links to live sites of online information and would need to be categorised that enable users to engage in faceted search to some degree. For example, EO data, infrared data, land surface temperature data, products and sensors. Okay, just quickly, also, turn mechanisms for agencies to reach users, that is, internal EOA advocacy and other awareness raising. Now, the last one was we identified as having the most overlap with Working Group 3, development of a skillful future workforce for capacity building and infrastructure development requirements. So that we had considerable discussion around how we might develop this by cutting to the chase directly with some sample institutions. And there are some two-way synergies with Action 4.1, so if we want to convey information to potential academic and government user community, that conversation can go the other way also, where we find out what they want and what their requirements are. And that's all.
Great. All right. Thanks very much, Jenny. So I think one thing to be clear with people is that the draft plan that each working group will come up with will be fed back into the steering committee and they'll look at how they all sit together because there will be potential overlap between groups. Sorry, can I just ask everyone to check that all of your microphones are on mute because we're getting feedback. All right, thanks. There's some overlap between working groups. A number of those items which were just mentioned directly overlap with ongoing CEOS activities and databases as well. But we've got to work out what's out there and make sure it fits together. Okay, thanks, Debbie. Next one is Sylvia Michael, the fifth working group looking at working with industry. So I'll just hand over to Sylvia now.
Thanks, Stuart. So I'm on this working group with DPAC, and we've also got 6 action items, and we've actually grouped them into timeline actions, as in the ones that we think would be most appropriate first and then working through the others. So we've grouped action items 5.1 and 5.4 as a gathering information, education and promotion, and we're hoping to certainly start and go a fair way through that in Q3 of this year. Some of the example activities in that group will be gathering information from existing, previous and potential Earth observation users, promoting Earth observation applications, promoting the 2020 conference and relevant websites and databases, and educating users, students with collaboration with other working groups. And particularly working groups 1, 3 and 4, I think will be very compatible in that section. The second series of actions, I think, fit under increasing the networking connections depending on results from previous actions. So the information we retrieve from the first group of actions would then lead us to increase our networks, define standards, and the two actions we've got in there, we hope to start in Q4 of this year and continue through the first half of 2019. So the sort of example activities in that would be capture economies of use, including inefficiencies, hold seminars and webinars to targeted audiences, to drive innovation for specific commercial applications and or technology, investigate current practices in Australia and overseas, and try to define standards, or at least give a bracket around what those standards should cover. And then the last two activities will come under lobbying, and this would be dependent on the results from the previous actions. And again, there's a lot of collaboration with the steering committee and particularly with Working Group 1. So example activities for those two actions would be to increase our network at the appropriate level, so whatever level that might be that we want to investigate, to search appropriate websites such as the Space Agency and SIA, and design and define pilot projects that can be commercialised, and with the idea that the driver for innovation should be a commercial application and or a technology which is in response to social, economic, scientific and environmental needs. So that's the plan for that is to start working on that in the second half of 2019. So there are our timelines and our order of activities.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Sylvia. Yeah, I'd just like to acknowledge everyone on the working groups for starting this. As everyone can see, there is some overlap between the groups, but once we get going, we'll resolve that. Also, once the operational structure of the Space Agency and large national activities like Digital Earth Australia are known, we'll be able to engage more effectively as well. All right, so just moving on to updates from a number of those key national and international initiatives. We'll just step through those so that we can keep within our time frame. Update on the Space Agency. So I think everyone was aware that in the announcement of the next financial year's budget, there was an initial allocation of funds for the next 2 years for the establishment of the Australian Space Agency, which is currently what it's called, headed by Dr. Megan Clark. The other key people in that at the moment are Anthony Murfitt, who will be the Deputy Director, and Joe Andrews, who has been the staff member responsible for compiling and putting together most of the information, will also be in that area. The expert reference group, which Dr. Clark chaired, had its report released at the time of the budget, and the Commonwealth Government had responded to that to note which of its recommendations it would support. I'd commend everyone to read that document if you haven't already. There's a key table in that report which says here's how ideally this agency should be set up. And I think 2 points to be clear about. This is not meant to be a big government activity in the sense of NASA, ESA, etc. The primary focus of our space agency is to build industry capability. I'll just let that sink in for a second. So that table sets out the roles that the agency will focus on. And along the bottom is the national budget. So the first 2 years, 25 million, which has been allocated already. The following 2 years, 50 million, and then up to 250 million per annum. Those of you that have looked at National Space Agency figures know that is a very small amount compared to what large-scale government agencies put in. If you have a look at the roles, national scale projects and missions, primary focus on building industry growth, then communication and training, acting as a front door for Australia to international groups, and then building national policy and strategy. So there's a recommended process there which is going to follow. It's something that we're starting to engage with and we'll hear more about through Earth Observation Australia. The steering committee and myself have continued to have conversations with Dr. Clark and lead people in the agency about what we do and how we can serve as a conduit to community, and as they build the agency and its processes, we'll maintain our communication and aim to be involved in what they do. The interesting thing is the agency has built on reviews like this and recognises the role of positioning and navigation, but also Earth observation in this area. We should keep in mind that those are quite small activities in relation to communication. This is also a relevant report to have a look at, which CSIRO publicised this as a part of their new National Earth Observation Centre, which was announced yesterday. It basically looks at where are the space capability areas that could be developed, and if you have a look down that table, what you'll actually see is that positioning and navigation, but Earth observation services and applications is a high capability and a high area to develop. So just reiterating a point I just said yesterday, CSIRO announced their new Earth Observation Centre. Alex Held's the director of that centre. He sends his apologies. He's at a turn workshop in Alice Springs today. There are some links there and a press release. This capability will link the different Earth observation capabilities that were previously across different CSIRO divisions into one consistent group for developing and delivering things. One of their primary activities is the developing applications for the Novastar satellite, which Australia has a share in, and you'll see some news come across our email lists about that in the next couple of weeks, as there'll be seminars around Australia about it as well. So that's a very positive step from our National Research Agency, that it's focusing its work in Earth observation. In terms of how we're going to continue to interact, at least at a political level with and a coordinating level with the Space Agency, the steering committee is working on a series of apolitical briefing documents that we can use for meeting with the Space Agency and also key politicians in areas around Australia. This has already gone on in terms of we've talked to people across all political parties to let them know what we do and the importance of Earth observation. There are briefs prepared for Earth observation, and then we have developed briefs for how we would support the Space Agency, Digital Earth Australia, and research infrastructure as well. So aside from the funding side of things, the steering committee has a role in communicating what we're doing in this space. Right, I hand over now to some of the other updates. And again, just being conscious of time, just making sure all our speakers try to keep the time. The Digital Earth Australia program update. So I don't know, Trent Kershaw from GA, are you online at the moment?
I'm here, yep.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Trent. I don't know if you had slides or not.
Unfortunately not.
No,
apologies for that.
Yep.
So look, as far as where we're at, we're very happy with the announcement that we received in May, confirming that we are going to have enduring funding moving forward for the DEA platform. So up until now, there's been a little bit of, I guess, concern around the uncertainty that we had with the 2-year funding. So this is for us a major milestone that means this is a real thing and it's here to stay. So just very briefly on the announcement, we've received around about $13 million a year enduring. So it's not often that we manage to get to a point where enduring funding happens, but it is $13 million a year forevermore. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of what DEA is. So DEA is a platform that will provide operational 24/7, 365 days a year access to a wide range of continental scale satellite Earth observation data and derived products. DEA will make it easier to transform satellite Earth observation data into valuable information. through the Digital Earth Australia platform, GA has been funded by the government to operate and continually enhance the DEA platform, including ensuring continuous supply of high quality analysis ready data from a growing range of sources. And with ongoing improvements to the quality of that data, to exploit the platform to support Australian government needs by developing and procuring algorithms and techniques to meet those needs, and undertaking necessary validation activity to ensure that we can actually confirm that what we're seeing and what we're saying we see is really what is going on the ground. We also, this is one of the major changes that comes with the ongoing funding that we've received, that there is far more of a focus on trying to positively impact the Australian digital economy. So basically what we've identified here is that many of the things that we're doing for government can be stepping stones for industry. So we are going to be focusing more and more over time on trying to help startups, try and help technology companies to engage more with Earth observation data. We also, in that, want to make sure that we are supporting the smooth transition of techniques developed through research projects on national research infrastructures into operational business models. So whether that is for public good or whether it is through commercialization, we want to make sure that we're making it easier for people to scale research algorithms into operational services. So I guess, and the final thing I'll say on that is that we are trying to make all of the data that we provide in this platform to be open and free to encourage commercialization and international collaboration. So the way that we've been working to date is very much focused on trying to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our users. So we've got a couple of activities going on at the moment, one with Data 61 and one with CRCSI, to better understand the actual user needs and I guess the user types of our government users and also our industry users. We have developed a roadmap, which I believe has been circulated by Stuart previously, that is an articulation of the work that we're doing today. So what I would ask everyone is if you do have the time and you are able to engage in that roadmap, we're intending to regularly update that on a quarterly basis, and it will be the representation of the work that we're doing. It is quite focused on Australian government at the moment, given where DEA kind of got its original funding, but I would see that as likely to change over the next 12 months as we focus more and more on industry. So we're collaborating with the CRCSI to develop an industry strategy. We've done some initial consultations with industry so far, and we're getting ready to ramp up and go through a bunch of detailed workshops where we try to better understand, I guess, some of the pulling points for industry and ultimately better meet their needs so that they can support the growth of the Australian economy.
Cool. Thanks very much, Trent. Given that there's some questions coming in by text, I might ask Trent to respond to those in the chat window so that we can progress.
Will do.
Okay, thanks. Okay, all right. So moving on to Tim Malthus for an update on one of the validation activities. So Tim, I do have your slides.
Yes, thank you, Stuart. So Guy Byrne gave an update on this, I believe, in the last meeting we had, or gave an outline of what this project was about, but essentially it's a funded project to collect in situ field spectroscopy data or field reflectance data at the time of satellite overpasses in order to form a basis for calibrating or determining the uncertainty in satellite determined reflectance data. The idea is to set up a general campaign that is essentially a collaborative one, not specifically tasked at DEA, although it's funded under that regime at the moment, but it's for the validation. It's a legacy data set for the calibration of any kind of satellite data. So we're looking at Landsat 8 and Sentinel-2 overpasses. We've done a series of campaigns. The photo on the right simply shows a joint campaign we undertook at the Pinnacles Sand Dune site in late May, where a couple of teams got together and compared methods. If we could move to the next slide. Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah.
Okay, and to date, this is just a summary of, so we have a number of sites identified around the country, and we have contributions from CSIRO, Geoscience Australia, University of Wollongong, University of South Australia, UQ, and I hope I haven't missed anybody off that list. So we have a number of teams actually contributing to this work. So far, we've collected 23 sets of data simultaneous to satellite overpasses. Much of this is weather dependent, of course. We hope to get to about 30 before the end of the financial year. But I should point out that the project is ongoing until the end of December in this first round anyway. So we have funding to continue to collect this data through to the end of the calendar year. Next slide, thanks, Stuart.
Yep.
Just some very early results from the work that the GA guys have obtained over Lake George, just north of the ACT. Just to show you, this is a comparison of field data calibrated for NBAR and then compared to the NBAR from both the USGS and GA data cubes to show that the axial agreement is very good. So this is just one site. We're hoping that the results will be similar for the number of sites across the country. Next slide, Stuart. I'm trying to keep this very brief.
Yeah, that's great.
Yep. And just to reiterate, we sent out an email via this forum a couple of weeks ago that as part of this activity, we're seeking historical spectral data. And these are two kinds of data sets we're after. These are essentially in-member data, so data that people might have taken of vegetation species, particular habitats, even leaf reflectance, leaf transmission data, etc. Which is adequately supported by appropriate metadata. So essentially spectral signature in-member information we're interested in. And we're also interested in historical field validation data. So this might have been larger campaigns that were run coinciding with previous satellite overpasses such as Landsat or EO1 that could be used to actually validate some of the data. At the moment, we're just looking to tabulate who's got what and where it is, and we might come back to then accumulating this data. The intention in terms of accumulation is to accumulate into the National Spectral Data Repository. So this is also being put together by Geoscience Australia, but built very much on the contributions that Laurie Chisholm made from the University of Wollongong on the Specchio database. I think if you have any data, please get back to either myself or Madavi Thankapan in GA, and I'll leave it at that, Stuart.
Cool, excellent. Thanks very much, Tim. It's good to see progress in that and also some clear skies in matchups there. So awesome. Yeah. All right, next one, industry engagement. So two brief components from Phil Delaney, who is currently in CRCSI, which I think Phil can confirm at the end of this month is going to transform to Frontiers SI. Whoops, over to you, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for that. And so I've actually been asked to cover 4 topics in 5 minutes, so this will be a bit more like an Ignite presentation with my slides advancing about every 15 seconds.
Awesome.
So just as the first topic, if we go to the next slide, the CRC-SI, after the last 15 years of being inside the CRC program, will be exiting as of July 1 and becoming an independent company known as Frontier SI, where unlike previous, SI doesn't really stand for anything anymore. It's whatever kind of acronym we want to make it on the end relevant to the situation. If we go to the next slide, we will be continuing our main mission, which is to be a collaborative applied research centre where we bring together the best organisations across government, research and the private sector to bring research ideas through to real world products and services. We will still be a not-for-profit and we will continue under our current company structure. If we go to the next slide, the key things that will be different for us are that exiting the CRC program means a lot less reporting and a lot more flexibility in terms of the types of applied research that we can focus on. It also opens up other opportunities such as ARC grants, which were closed off to us while we were under the CRC program. And we will be continued to focus on research which really benefits our core partners, which are mostly state and federal government departments, but we've already got almost 15 private companies sign up to the Future of Frontier as well. These slides will be distributed. So on the next slide, I'll skip this, but analytics still remains a key part of our research team, and this is where the Earth observation will be fitting in for our coming years, with an increasing focus on real time and products. So on the onto the DEA stuff that Trent mentioned briefly earlier. On the next slide, we can see that the CRC/Frontier SI, sorry, if we just move to the next slide, Stuart, have been asked to undertake some industry consultation. So this is really, now that the future funding has been confirmed, the focus of DEA will need to be including how this can help to benefit the private sector. And our role has been to try and define the best way in which that's likely to happen, not just for traditional spatial and Earth observation companies, but more broadly across all of the Australian economy. In terms of how we're going to do this, the next slide outlines a bit of how we've been doing this. So we've already undertaken one-on-one interviews and closed out that process. That was about half quote-unquote spatial companies and half organisations from key growth sectors of the Australian economy, covering all sorts of different organisations to really understand key drivers and barriers and to guide some of the direction for the future funding ask, as well as guiding the technical direction and access. We've been a little bit quiet on that over the past couple of months as we try and work on the publicly facing elements of DEA, which should be available over the next 6 weeks, including visualization interfaces, but also a more friendly public cloud environment outside of, but complementary to NCI. So we'll be publishing our findings within the next 2 weeks at the very start of July. And then following that, we'll be planning on running some national workshops focused on the private sector around the country, which will be half around some technical training and education, and half around the industry strategy. So what are the kinds of things that GA and industry need to do to make sure that with this infrastructure being funded, it provides the most benefit and flexibility to the private sector as it can. And we will be aiming to have that strategy finalised by the end of this year. So quickly on to the next slide, which is about the Open Data Cube. So the Open Data Cube is the technology that Digital Earth Australia is built on. DEA is the Australian implementation of the Open Data Cube, but there are now something like 5 to 10, I believe, production instances of ODC in countries around the world, and 20 to 30 countries exploring pilot demonstrators. And we've got 2 staff members internally, Alex Leith and Felix Lipkin, who have been asked to help to foster and grow that open source community globally, which we're doing with the help of AMA in the States and Symbios here in Australia. On the next slide, a couple of key outputs of that already. Those links will work in the presentation for what we distribute next. Are some easier to deploy instances of the Open Data Cube, which we've called Cube in a Box, which are a Dockerized deployment of the Open Data Cube, which should be up and running on any cloud infrastructure within 15 minutes, pointing at any data source that's on the cloud, including the Digital Earth Australia analysis ready data. as well as a point-and-click sandbox effort using the technologies that you see on screen there. So onto my last topic, which will be quick, is on a different note, just to talk about where we're at with the 2026 agenda, which is the broader spatial industry agenda that aligns with the Earth Observation Community Plan. Last year, if you go to the next slide, we published a review of progress in the first year of the 2026 agenda. That is found at 2026agenda.com. And basically outlines with the 32 initiatives, of which Earth observation is relevant to a large proportion of those. The progress or sometimes lack thereof against each one of those initiatives, and which organisation is leading those. So I'm happy to answer any questions around that. And in the interest of time, we'll probably skip over the last couple of slides there.
Great.
So thanks, Stuart.
Thanks very much, Phil, for going through that at a pace. And again, if you've got questions, I think type them in the chat window for Phil or email it to me, and we can deal with it as a group email later on. So I think it's pretty clear we are going to run over time. So apologies for not managing that effectively. We've still got a couple of important presentations to go. So I'll just hand over to Jono Ross from Geoscience Australia.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. The new space agency we've talked about, one of the exciting things is it really will have a focus on unlocking our international space engagement. But fortunately or unfortunately for us, it doesn't actually change any of the existing domain-specific responsibilities. So at a Commonwealth level, delivery of Earth observation activities internationally is still with GA, BOM and CSIRO. So we'll keep on with supporting our relationships with agencies on EO such as USGS, NASA, ESA, and so on. And an example of that is CSIRO and GA will be delivering the CEOS Strategic Implementation Team Chairmanship in 20 and 21. So the good thing there is that will bring a lot of senior space agency people, their procurement people, technical experts, and so on back to our shores. One of the things we see is good out of the space agency is it's going to focus on addressing areas that are not currently addressed. And we also see that it gives us opportunities probably to more easily trade off, for example, contributions Australia might make in areas such as space situational awareness, and trade those off for help in EO areas in a way that's not quite so easy now, where we're looking more for a trade with them on, we do something for you on EO, you do something for us. This makes it a much bigger set of things we can look at. So I'd say if anyone here has got any thoughts, they should definitely share them with Megan or with Anthony Murfitt. As Stuart said, they're really keen on that stuff. Just want to remind everyone that the European Union Horizon 2020 call for Australian-European collaboration on applications development will open in October and close in March next year. This is the one, there was a range of workshops run on that recently. Essentially what this call means is if you can find an EU partner who will work with you on innovative applications development using EO, they can get paid by the Commission. So we don't necessarily get paid. That's not how Horizon 2020 works, but your partner can get paid. So that's pretty good. And it also means that there are European partners out there looking for an Australian partner so they can access that funding. So it's a really good way for us to build those relationships. On the subject of the EU, some of you have probably seen in the press, the European Commission has proposed a major increase in funding for space, including for Copernicus. That funding will ensure the sustainment of the current family of missions, of Sentinel missions, and it will also look to expand that to new areas, including operational monitoring of atmospheric CO2. But look, at this stage, it is just a budget bid. It needs to make its way through all the relevant processes. But we were very happy to see that the Commission's proposal stresses the need for continuation of the full, free and open data policy. So in terms of those new missions, including a hyperspectral mission, thermal mission, and so on, the scoping studies for those are underway and they're being managed by ESA. It is possible that even the large budget bid I referred to may not be enough to develop all those missions, So I think we should be on the lookout here for opportunities for co-investment by international partners. So if we have a particular interest as a community in, say, the hyperspectral mission, and there's a capability that Australian industry could offer to that, if they don't have the money to do it all themselves, they might be looking for other interested countries to work with them. So I think that's one, probably more in the CSIRO and space agency world, but it's something where if the community can be clear to the agency, for example, that this is something that would be of huge benefit to Australia, you know, when they're weighing up what partnerships they support, that might be very useful to them. Two other quick points. So some positive news we had from Japan last year on the data policy for ALOS 2, where there was talk that a lot of that data would be full, free and open. That's back up in the air again. Apparently the announcement was a bit premature, and there are still ongoing discussions between JAXA and their commercial partners on that. But the recent news we've had is we're still hoping for a positive outcome, at least for the 100-meter pulsar data. So that would be good. I know that certainly when we got open access to the ALOS 1 pulsar data, we've seen a lot more use of that data, and that's great for radar in this country. And lastly, I'm sure many have seen the media coverage of the fact that the Landsat Advisory Group is reviewing the data policy. That group is happy to receive submissions on the topic from anyone. They're very interested to hear on the impact that the open policy has had, and in particular, they're interested in hearing how that policy has helped America. And it may be how it's helped America in its relationships with partners such as us. We've already worked with the other Landsat international cooperators, so the other countries that support the Landsat program, and have put in a joint response. And GA will be submitting a separate response. But I would encourage anyone who's got a perspective to think about providing it. And that's all from me, Stuart. Thanks.
Great. Thanks very much, Jono. I know that's a small part of a lot which is going on internationally at present. So just one point on collaborative research infrastructure and update. I think most people in the community are aware that we put in a research infrastructure bid as part of the National Research Infrastructure Program last year. The initial 2-year allocations for that scheme were announced as part of the budget release in May. We were told that we didn't get up in this particular round, but this program, National Research Infrastructure Program, which does have continuing funding for 10 years, the allocations will be reviewed every 2 years, and we've been told by the group running that program that we need to stay engaged and essentially communicate and demonstrate how we are interacting and engaging with Commonwealth agencies, Digital Earth Australia, and supporting research. In parallel with that, what we're doing is looking at where are other avenues for supporting the calibration validation programs which are in here, and then also the experimental to operational platforms. And you'll see some of that starting to appear in our interactions with Digital Earth Australia, with the Australian Space Agency and other research proposals. So we know everyone put a huge amount of work into getting this together. It's still being used to move us forward in that space as well. Okay, what we're going to do now is move to something slightly different. With each of our webinars, we're now trying to include some of the companies which are new or starting in Earth observation to give them a chance to explain what they're doing, so as an industry we can get a better understanding. So I'm fortunate that Anastasia from Plurasat's been willing to talk today, so I'll hand over the slides now to Anastasia. If you let me know when to advance them, I'll do that.
Hi everyone. I think I've met quite a few people in this webinar. It's great to speak to you and now in the capacity of the CEO of a funded startup. So it's been a great journey so far. We've been running for 13 months, and I would like to let you know in a fairly quick way, so we'll advance through the slides by probably skipping some of them because we're over time and I had a meeting myself at 12 o'clock. So so what Fluorosat is doing, next slide, please. And keep clicking a little bit here. So we're doing the following. The previous one. Just come back. Yeah, thank you. So Fluorosat is combining the remote sensing imagery, the remote sensing data with on-the-ground observations to improve the way that crops are managed. And we are in decision support software space. So we are combining the agricultural information that gets collected in the field, and we direct the way that it gets collected, and we're combining it with remote sensing imagery such as multispectral and hyperspectral drone, airplane, and satellite-based imagery. And so you could have guessed that we have fusion techniques there, and our interest is in deriving predictive crop health analytics. And what we're looking at primarily here is not just going beyond NDVI, but importantly advancing the hyperspectral space, which I feel quite a few people on this call are excited about as well. Stuart, if we could click twice. Yeah, so that's our hyperspectral cube over macadamia orchard, and the interesting part there where we show this image, and to majority of you it would be, yes, of course it's hyperspectral from the plane or the drone, and this is how it works, but for majority of people this is news. And if we keep clicking here a little bit, we'll be able to see that there are obviously all the different features, the dying, the trees that are on distress, and again, let's click again. So those are different, obviously, types of vegetation that we could track by passing the hyperspectral cube through the analysis. And importantly, the bottom side of the picture, you see lines within the orchard. And Stuart, if you click again, you will be able to see that actually hyperspectral, even without thermal band and without any SWIR, is able to pick up the watering, the irrigation effects. So what this is to show you is that we are dedicated and committed to making hyperspectral commercially available in the space with what's involved there in terms of compression and data analysis and smart analysis of the data and its fusion with other sources of imagery. And we're not developing our own sensors or own planes. We are partnering with people where we are a CSIRO venture arm, Main Sequence Ventures funded startup, and there are a couple of other funders on our capital table as well, capitalization table, and what we are best at is commercializing the science. So we're looking at extracting most of the data from this analytics. Could we click again, please? Yeah, so this is roughly how the software looks like. So you can see it's a field-based analysis. I grabbed a pretty basic screen of our software that allows you to see there are a few things. We're tracking it on the field basis. We're looking at some of the specific sampling points, some of the specific areas where the direction of the operations on the farm needs to be headed, so agronomist attention. We are doing a crop-based, crop-specific analysis, and what you can get from the imagery and the information coming from the farm together would be things like knowing the anomalies, knowing what rather than just where. So if it's a water stress, if it's a nutrient stress, if it's a combined stress, if it's a disease that's developing because we're expecting a disease in these weather conditions and this type of crop at this time of the year. So we are giving those hints to an agronomist, and they're going in ground truth in that, which allows them to be more efficient and ultimately for the farmer to grow more with less. And we'll just go through a couple of business slides, I imagine here. Just next one, Stuart. So if you think of us, some people only use planes, and some of our, the American companies that we're compared to are heavily invested into their infrastructure, and they're mostly using multispectral imagery. We are developing the system that's hyperspectral native from the machine learning perspective, from the data analytics perspective, and we can fuse imagery from different platforms, and we are big on turning pixels into numbers. One of our first products is nitrogen map of the field for cotton and grain crops. So basically, people are able to then make a direct fertilizer application recommendation based on numbers rather than NDVI index or red edge index, or just some number that they cannot tie to their agronomic parameter. Next one, please. So if you're wondering how the business works, we're talking to agronomists primarily. We're not selling to farmers. We're talking to commercial agronomists and independent agronomists, and they are buying this as a subscription per season, per area, and that's the business model side of things. Next slide, please. And we here outlining the opportunity that we see in the space, which can be interesting for the other parties on the call today. We recognize that we can be seen as a fairly young company. We do have experts in different areas, but where we see our participation in Earth Observation Australia group is the ability not just to interact with CSIRO and with research institutions that we are directly plugged in, such as University of Sydney and UNSW, but actually reach out to the broader community where we are moving a small mountain on a very small scale, and you guys have experience in adjacent areas, and if we could collaborate, we could capture those numbers. So when you're looking at 300 million for Australian market, this is just decision support in key crop types, in grain and cotton, and that extrapolates to the US into global numbers of $10 billion total addressable market. And these are not inflated numbers. These are key crop types and key savings and gains that people could be making with this technology. And it's all about commercialization of research. And you can think of us as your I guess, extension partner. So we're heavily plugged into the R&D with university, CSIRO, and do quite a fair bit in-house. But we're looking for partners who have conducted trials with whom we could collaborate on the ground truthing, data capture, providing you with the industry application and your new application for the grant. There's so much funding available for SMEs and research cooperations that I think we've been able to exploit that, and not only we raised venture capital, we have a range of government grants from state and federal government and development corporations that we would like you to be a part of. Next slide, please. So one of our case studies, just to quickly give you an idea of what that nitrogen mapping talked about, is that if you use an NDVI for the analysis of your nutrient efficiency for the nitrogen content of your crop, this is really not efficient because the correlations that you're getting between NDVI as an index in your tissue sampling nitrogen are on the order of 19%, as opposed to higher correlations that we're getting with chlorophyll canopy maps that we're able to calibrate using the in-field information to every paddock that gets tested and then extrapolated to adjacent areas that exhibit similar properties. So this is a commercial product available for agronomists now. In the US and in Australia, we are in beta testing early adopters program. If you would like to reach out to us, please go to fluoresat.com and you'll be able to see how to get access, and then just drop me an email and we'll approve you for that. And that's the case study for folks who would like to know that we're serious about validating our data. And that's been conducted with New South Wales DPI and with a number of commercial growers who are at top of the industry. And something important to note here, that we are backed by the Cotton Research Development Corporation as well, who sees the important contribution of decreasing the amount of environmental impact that agriculture makes by overusing the nutrients. Next slide, please, Stuart. Next slide, please. So these are the companies we're either backed by or working with. So let's just skip that. That's okay. So this is our kind of wish. No, that's okay. We've got enough PhDs on the team to know how to, in an educated way, talk to everybody about what we're doing. And we would like to collaborate. So here's our wish list. And if you're thinking of, there's an opportunity to bring in a commercial party into this project with orchards and mapping of the nutrient stress there, or mapping of the yield potential, or you're in involved in grain trials or any other interesting industry applications. If you're wondering, we've been talking a lot with Phil Delaney and with other folks from the groups represented today about the industry applications, and we're interested in driving your research into the extension and out there to reach the community, to be used, and often that means collaborative co-development that can be often funded. So the first half of the presentations was about, how do we make sure that Earth Observation Australia has money and runs successfully as a community group. Well, we believe that this is an opportunity for you to collaborate with industries, starting with small and medium businesses, to get to that goal. And I think final slide should be, next slide, please. Yes, that's our final slide. So please look us up, reach out to me either on the email that you can find on the website or through social media. And we would love to talk about the projects that you're involved in, and if you're seeing a commercialization pathway, whether we could help there. Thank you so much for the attention.
Thanks very much, Anastasia, and apologies that we went over time. I really appreciate that talk today. I do want to just close this session with 2 points. If you think about what Anastasia's talked about and the Digital Earth Australia presentation, one of the things we need to focus on in the community is pulling apart what is operational delivery of data access and services, what is, private industry research and, private industry applications, and what's research and development. We haven't done that well in the past, and the reason I wanted a fair bit of time on those 2 areas today is to make it clear that we really need to move down that path of separation. And it is a new area for a lot of us in terms of pulling it apart, but this is the direction that the Space Agency and the government is going, and we've got a lot of capability to engage with all of these things. So thanks again on that. Okay, next steps. I'm going to skip other business because we're over time. I would ask if people have questions just to submit them on the chat or email. So as a follow-up, there will be obviously a recording and some key action items from the meeting. We'll distribute those. You will see that we will try to move to slightly more frequent meetings from now on because there's a lot going on. So there's our next meetings at the moment. Please do take the exit survey. I think you've seen as of today, we've got an expanded set of material to present and update each time. So we're particularly keen on improving that as well. I'm just going to have a quick look at that chat there as well. I've seen the presentations that are going on, the discussions going on while we've been hearing from everyone else. I didn't include an update on the Earth Observation for Government Network, but we'll do an email around to everyone about that as well. So again, just thank you everybody for attending today, all the presenters for your time in prep and showing us, where we've got a lot of room for direction and growth. And Joe's just sent a message with the exit survey link. So please spend a couple of minutes letting us know how to do that as well. And also all the presenters as well. And as you can see, Anastasia's keen to reach out and collaborate. So thanks again, everybody, for your time today, and also to Joe for her time in organising this and making sure it worked properly as well. So we'll be in touch again soon. Thanks, everyone.